more people. Yeah.
Warm welcome to all of you to today's Investment Outlook session for Georgia. The theme is Georgia on the global stage, unlocking investment opportunities. Your Excellencies, dear friends, dear investors, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear government officials. Today's presentation is structured in 3 stages. First is a teaser video that you will see soon presenting beautiful Georgia in about 2 minutes. Duration of the film. Then we will have the privilege to listen to Deputy Minister Ega Kutsanze, who will give us a summary of Georgia's macroeconomic performance, and that, in our view, is the basis of the investment climate in the country. And the third stage would be what we hope to be a very lively panel discussion with private sector participants and the government discussing what we hope that you will find good questions and interesting ones, the investment climate in Georgia in key sectors like banking, IT, and industry. So without further ado, I would like our technical team to now present the video for Georgia. Thank you very much.
Georgia is located in the South Caucasus region, located between Europe and Asia on a historical Silk Road. Doing business in Georgia places companies at a strategic junction where cultures and economies meet. Georgia has gone through significant structural reforms and continues to do so in line with global development goals and commitments. The post-pandemic period of the Georgian economy began with a rapid recovery, marked by double-digit growth in 2021 to 2022. The momentum continued into 2023, with much higher than potential economic growth. We retained a stable positive outlook and credit ratings. Proud of being the meeting point of Europe and Asia, Georgia has been reforming legislation systems to approximate EU regulations and practices. EU candidacy status granted to Georgia in last December marks one of the greatest achievements and encourages even stronger motivation to reform further. Modern Georgia, an important and reliable partner within the Middle Corridor, has been advancing its connectivity, investment, logistics and tourism opportunities to eventually become a regional hub with an important role in the East-West trade relations. Groundbreaking projects such as East-West Highway, South-North Corridor and energy transmission lines are being constructed to enhance connectivity. Georgia's potential of generating green hydro and other renewable resources enhances further connectivity with the EU through Georgia by constructing the underwater Black Sea cable. The transport and logistics potential of Georgia is bound to be boosted by its ports on the Black Sea. While visiting Georgia, you discover a country of ancient civilization and culture, picturesque nature with freezing glaciers, diverse shorelines, emerald forests, national parks and polyphonic folk songs already traveling in space. The country where hospitality is the oldest and the most valuable tradition, Georgia is the homeland of wine. Place where people of different origins, languages and religions have always been living in peace and benefiting from the diverse influence while cherishing and preserving what's unique. As they say and believe in Georgia, a guest is a God-sent gift. Georgia boldly embraces its rich traditions and forward-looking vision, firmly paving the way towards Europe.
Thank you very much. So I hope you liked the video. I'm taking my seat here and I would like now to invite our keynote speaker, Ega Kutsanze, to start the presentation. But before you do that, Eka, let me present you to our audience, to our friends, to our panelists, to our participants here. So Eka Kutsanze is the Deputy Minister of Finance in charge of foreign relations and external financing. She has over 16 years in public finance management. She has worked for the World Bank for a short period of time and also in the IMF. And she has a master's degree in public administration from the Georgian Institute of Public Affairs. So, Weka, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear my voice. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me welcome you to today's session, Investment Outlook for Georgia in Yerevan. And first of all, let me start with thanking the Armenian government for organizing this annual event. And 2 weeks apart from the ADB annual meetings, believe me, I do know what kind of the responsibility that takes and what kind of honor that is to host so many guests. So congratulations for all the preparational works and for everything you are doing to host this event today. Let me also thank Alkis for being able today to moderate our panel and also to take the lead to organize that. And obviously I want to thank the panelists who agreed to join us today, who are very, very successful people in their line of work and do really deliver impact working together with the regional and global community. So with that, let me start with a brief outlook of Georgia's economic development that I hope will give some brief context to today's panel discussion. Georgia is a small and open economy, as we very often characterize it. We've been upper middle income country since 2015, and we are quite highly ranking in many fiscal and economic governance related indicators. The fiscal rules, fiscal governance, tax burden related rankings, as well as open budget survey, they all show quite good progress that Georgia has achieved for the past decades that we believe has been one of the key points of macroeconomic stability that has led to the resilience and the development. That has not been easy for anybody in this region or globally or for Georgia, obviously. So one word that I would say characterizes very well Georgia's economy as well as Georgia's very vibrant and active society would be resilient. We've showed that we can be very resilient to different shocks, which are not a few in our regions, obviously. Then post-pandemic, and then a period that showed recovery that started almost immediately in 2021, and after the economic decline in 2020, which was common for everybody globally and in the region, we started to recover and rebound in two-digit numbers in 2021 and 2022, which of course was also coincided with very unfortunate events happening in the region, causing the war in Ukraine by Russia's invasion, and bringing even more uncertainty to the outlook. But Georgia continued to be resilient, and after 2 years in a row in sequence of two-digit growth, we ended up with 2023 again higher than our potential growth of 5%, and the preliminary results according to the Geostat for 2023 are 7.5%, as well as it continues to show this resilience as a fact for the first quarter of the 2024. According to the preliminary results, the first quarter was 7.8%. So the trend was observed. Though in the medium run forecast, the assumption is that we will reconvene back to the 5% growth in the medium run and continue to be resilient to the upcoming shocks that may occur. It needs to be mentioned that the current account deficit also showed quite significant improvement. The structural improvements were also noticed pre-pandemic, but obviously pandemic developments distorted the picture. But then rebounding after the post-pandemic shows that current account deficit for 2023, for example, was the record low, 4.3%, and it continues to show improvements continuing for 2024 as well. The international trade is, of course, very important for a country like Georgia, though there have been obvious international constraints for traditional commodities and goods that we export, like ferroalloys, but then there have been increase in the services, and tourism rebounded very significantly. That again showed the resilience and somehow compensated with the decrease in the traditional commodities for the export. As I mentioned, tourism revenues have rebounded very strongly. It started to rebound from 2021 and 2022. By end 2023, we ended up with the tourism revenue being higher than 26% to pre-pandemic 2019 levels. And the trend was obvious for the Q1 of 2024 as well, since the 2024 Q1 tourism revenues is 140% of what was in 2019 Q1. So the inflation, of course, was a factor that played significant role globally and regionally. Most of the countries around us ran very high inflation for the post-pandemic and during the when the war started. Georgia also had two-digit inflations at that period, but then it started to decline. It needs to be mentioned that the monetary policy was quite strict, and the National Bank of Georgia started the strict monetary policy quite early and increased the rates quite significantly. And what we get by the end of today, let's say, for the past 12 months, we have inflation less than 1%, with the April figures being 1.5%, and the assumptions that by the end of the year, the inflation will reach the National Bank target, which is 3%. Then we also need to mention that during pandemic period, we had quite a shift from our disclosed strategy of debt management to diversify our debt portfolio. And during the pandemic period, obviously, our fiscal rules were also breached, and our debt to GDP ratio went up to 60.1%. That caused the breach of the fiscal rule, and again, the deficit also was more than 9%. And that signified that escape clauses would be triggered that would need to reconcile within the 3-year period that our fiscal rule allows us to do so. Obviously, during pandemic, we needed, while the monetary policy was strengthening, we needed to also fiscally support the business, support the healthcare and social sector, and expand fiscally. But then we started to reconcile afterwards very sharply. And by within 2 years, we can say that we managed to bring our debt to GDP ratio below the 40% threshold, which is considered to be a safe debt level, and our deficit below the 3% threshold. For debt management, there are several factors that we've been following in our debt management strategy. That is not only to monitor that we keep our debt to GDP ratio within a safe debt level, which is around 40-45%, but also to look at the portfolio and the share of the domestic versus external borrowings. As during pre-pandemic, we can say that 80% of our debt was denominated in foreign currency. That was one of the reasons also of the spike in the debt to GDP ratio. So as part of the debt management strategy, we've been trying to diversify our debt portfolio by increasing more on domestic market borrowing, and at the same time being very scrutinizing on external borrowing and using public investment management tools to identify the projects which are worth with their economic errors to borrow externally for, and which are the projects that better be financed through domestic funding. This is how we managed to bring our debt to GDP ratio, of course, with the exchange rate also appreciating below 40% to the GDP, and also the share of the current external debt from 80% to around 72% in the total debt portfolio. As I mentioned, we got back to our strategy of increasing more on domestic borrowing and domestic capital market development. Then, as part of this exercise, the Ministry of Finance has started the exercise to sophisticate more the domestic treasury bills and bonds and securities issuance with buybacks, with switches, with other operations. to help the domestic market develop. We're also very actively discussing with the international financial institutions of the options, how we could be also discussing the options of borrowing from external sources in domestic currencies, and sharing some risks with the currency-related issues. And this has been the strategy based on which we try to diversify our debt portfolio. So maybe I'm a little bit out of the time, but I will still mention that to reach the macroeconomic and fiscal stable figures, there is important that the structural reforms are conducted in a systematic manner. Besides the public finance management, these are reforms like in state-owned enterprises or human capital development that, of course, have a cross-cutting impact on sustainability for our macro fiscal stability, and we've been quite active in this area. Irrespective of all the constraints with the fiscal space, we always kept our capex quite high, around 7-8%, to implement those projects that are key for our middle corridor-related projects or European connectivity-related projects, and the pipeline is also very heavy with this project. So I think I will stop here, and possibly I'll have some time to then elaborate on some of the topics as part of my answers to the questions. And again, I trust we'll have an active panel today.
Congratulations. Please be seated. You bombarded us with a few numbers. Let these slides stay there, please, because I would like to have my first question, which is related to the reforms. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has been a very supportive financial institutions to the growth success of Georgia. So far we have invested a little bit over 5 billion, and we will end up this year by having in total 300 signed projects in your country. And this year will be a good one for us too. So we have been able to do this on the back of the reforms and of the strong macroeconomic performance. So thinking about investment climate, and with this slide, what is the link between macroeconomic performance of Georgia, investment climate, and what could be, your key areas of focus for reforms, for attracting foreign direct investment, for putting Georgia in the global stage, as we have?
Thank you, Alkis. Obviously, the theoretical answer to your question is obviously there is a direct link of macroeconomic stability and investment climate. But the paths and the ways how to achieve them, they are not the same for every country, and they are very context-specific, I would say. From our point of view, the very first words I used to explain the first slide was that we keep to be a small and open economy. We have a fiscal rule in place that guarantees that the tax burden remains limited and low, and that always gives the credibility that there is big room for the private sector to develop and to invest versus the constrained fiscal space of the sovereign government. And this is what we've been trying to promote with building the public finance management related systems, fiscal governance and economic governance related systems in place, and creating the environment where the private sector has potential to develop further. When talking with the portfolio with EBRD and many other IFIs as well, bulk of those portfolios are private sector led, not sovereign led, right? And the fact that you have this good cooperation and this possibility of the private sector gets investments through international IFIs is also, I guess, the result of the macro-fiscal stability that has been provided as a result of the reforms for the past 2 decades.
Thank you very much. Now, between us, we will have the private sector. It's the time for the private sector to take part in our panel. And I would like to start with Archil Katsatsilage, who is the Executive Director and CEO of Bank of Georgia. Please, Archil, take your seat next to me. Prior to his current appointment, Archil served as CEO of the Georgia Global Utilities, and of course you were abroad. You had a career with Lehman Brothers for a few years, and you hold a bachelor's degree in economics from the Tbilisi State University with distinction from Cornell University, MBA after that, and you are a CFA shareholder. I mean, I need that qualification myself. And welcome to our panel.
Figure out how to turn this on.
It's a challenge. Then next to him, I would like to invite Georgi Tsikolia. Georgi is Vice President of Lineat. Georgi has more than 15 years experience as a senior executive. He holds the position of Regional Director of Lineat, a U.S. software development company that operates throughout Eastern Europe. You manage multiple offices, and before joining Lineat, you have also had a diplomatic career. You were part of the administration of Georgia, and before that, you had you have the experience of being the CEO of a startup. So very interesting career, very interesting mix. And you have received your education from Fletcher School of Diplomacy at Tiflis University, a leading institution in international relations. Tufts, yes. Yeah. So it means I need to look at my eyes, my vision. And then last but not least is Levan Vebkhadze. Levan was appointed as Executive Director of the Business Association for Georgia. And you have this position since May 19, and before that you were chairman of the Energy Committee in the Business Association of Georgia. You have many years' experience of working managerial position in private sector companies. You have been an advisor to the General Director of the Georgian Industrial Group, and now you are an active member also for the Investors Council in Georgia, and you represent the industry. Your bank, your association has more than 1,500 members and represents a good proportion of Georgia's private sector. So with this introduction of our distinguished panelists, let me go on for the first question that goes to Archil. Archil, banking sector, right, in Georgia. It has been, banking sector and financial sector in Georgia has been a strong, vibrant sector, leading innovation, expanding regionally, with major success now in this country, very recently. So what are the key factors that contribute to this success, and what are the opportunities and challenges facing Georgia's financial sector in putting Georgia in global arena?
So it's a big question.
Yeah,
but
you have 3 minutes.
I was going to speak for 45, but I can say many of you may not know that banking in Georgia is quite well developed in terms of digital offerings specifically. I think we are on the forefront in terms of the development on that regionally, at least if not globally. And what allows me to speak that is that I've toured all of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, basically country by country, to see what the opportunities were. And I have to say that I think our offering is pretty good. And it's pretty good because we have had one significant competitor, and I think their offering is also not bad.
It is great.
And I think this competition of almost like Pepsi and Coca-Cola type of competition that we've had for many years has made both of us pretty good. And one stat that I would like to describe in banking that we have is monthly active users. So we basically strive to be the daily bank for our population. And in a population of 3.7 million people, where the bankable population is probably just slightly more than 2 million, 2.2 probably, we have 1.4 million monthly active user of our retail application. And of that, about half of that people, slightly more in fact, 55 now, use it on a daily basis. So what does that mean is that 700,000 people daily open our application. That makes us the biggest media in the country after Facebook and Instagram, which people don't realize because it's basically a financial media, right? So it tells you about your finances and so forth. But we have developed it to a point where it includes a lot of different things, including your travel insurance, including a lot of different offers and so forth. And all of that has allowed us to really become a daily application for our population. So 1.4 million monthly active user on a monthly basis. So in terms of challenges, so I think we have achieved that primarily by putting, everybody talks about it, but basically listening to what customers want. And we took it to a religious level. So we measure what customers like and what they dislike, channel by channel, be it in the different applications, in ATMs, in branches, and so forth. And then we also try to incorporate what the changes into the product mix, and we prioritize those because you can't do everything together, and we do it in a very fast way. So that is easy to say and not so easy to do, because on the backside you have to be quite lean and flat to deliver that. So we do that. In terms of challenges, I think Eka mentioned that we are very resilient as an economy, so we're used to volatility, but I think challenges are related to the stability and volatility. And we are used to volatility, but what we are seeing now over the last few days, basically, this is a good example of what kind of challenges we are. But when things are good, then things are really good, because for 3-4 years we have basically seen an incredible economic performance, and incredible economic performance has been reflected on us as well. So in everything there's opportunity, and hopefully that all of this noise will somehow decrease in few days.
Yeah. So if I want to summarize, it's access to finance, technology, and innovation internally all the time. That's the key to success, and the challenge itself.
Focus on customer.
Also.
And then focus on customer, and then again, and then trying to incorporate what they do in a speedy way. And that takes a whole culture in the organization, which we have been able to instill.
Thank you. So you discussed a lot about IT, and that is an excellent pass for the next speaker. So, Georgi, the IT sector and digitalization have been the driving forces and have been, bringing groundbreaking changes and solutions across sectors of the economy, including the enormous transformation and ways to business that brings probably the prospect of artificial intelligence and all that. So what are the competitive advantages that you see in the region, in Georgia and in the region, in your sector? Well,
thank you for such a question. I'm happy, first of all, that I've dealt with the mic better than Archil did. From the first part, so hopefully everybody can hear me. It's a pleasure being back to this wonderful city, pleasure being back to Armenia. Thank you, everybody, for organizing this, and thank you for dedicating your time to listening to opportunities that exist in Georgia and learning about our company and overall about the economic outlook of Georgia. I represent an American technology company called Lineate. Lineate has more than a decade of experience in custom software. A lot of people ask me, what is this custom software, what does it actually mean? Well, Archil spoke a lot about daily life and the technology that we use in our daily activities. I mean, all those apps that we open use platforms through which we order services or offer services. There are hundreds of thousands of people that work behind the scenes in order to make sure that they are user-friendly, they're efficient, and they allow businesses to grow. So we are in that business. We'll create a very special product, top-notch product, together with the leading brands throughout the world, would be it's Warner Media, YouTube, NYU, and others. Our company headquarters regionally is in Tbilisi. We've employed close to 200 people in Tbilisi, and we have an office in Yerevan as well. We're probably one of the few American companies that have offices in both countries, in South Caucasus, which shows our long-term positive outlook in regards to economic opportunities that the region offers. And of course, when it comes to competitive advantages in our business, as in other industries as well, we'll look at the issues starting with the availability of the human capital, which is very important to us, and seeing the growth and overall industry in Georgia and availability of very qualified labor pool. That for us was one of the reasons of establishing a regional center in Georgia. Beside that, of course, subsequent infrastructure, technological infrastructure, access to internet, quality of internet, pricing, and future plans to develop the infrastructure related to the tech, something that we look very closely to. And it was very encouraging to see that the Georgian government was and is willing to invest in developing that infrastructure further. And the third, and of course, one of the crucial parts was a long-term belief in policy sustainability. And what I mean by that is that a lot of countries around the world are offering additional incentives to the companies just to make sure that they're able to lure the best technology companies and through them kind of drive innovation through different policy mechanisms, would be tax incentives and others. And in that case as well, Georgia and the existing policy that exists in Georgia is quite assuring for international companies, especially for companies in the field of technology, where we have a special taxation regime that allows us to plan for the long-term growth in the country and be quite comfortable with developing those plans as well. So combination of those three was the reason why we've invested in a long-term in Georgia. And of course, looking at the region widely for us, getting into Armenian market and making sure that we kind of expand regionally through both markets was a no-brainer decision as well. Because if you look at the Armenian market, especially in tech, it's been developing very rapidly for the past 2 decades. The development of this market started a little bit earlier than it started in Georgia as well. So the combination of the two, and overall cost of business that was very favorable to our industry, was something that we were looking at and looked positively as well. And happy with an outcome that we have today. So.
Perfect. So we do have a strong banking sector. We have promising IT. So what's with the rest of the industry? So, dear Levan, Georgia continues to foster a business-friendly environment with its open economy. And yeah, there are 47 free trade agreements, including with the EU. The country has achieved the EU membership. There is a difficulty with the mic today, I see. Yeah? The EU membership candidacy was achieved, and Georgia has achieved very good international rankings. So, what are in the view of the business regime of Georgia, the factors that can further unlock Georgia's investment climate and generate new investment opportunities?
Thank you for insightful question, but in the beginning I have to admit that Georg is the winner with the microphone, because with the technology he's the winner.
IT guy.
Yeah, he can switch on.
That's a start.
You mentioned these words, business climate, and it comes to my mind our business BAG index. You already provided kind of brief introduction about BAG. It's about 1,500 companies, but you didn't mention that it is around 75% of GDP. They generate around 75% of GDP. That's why I think that this context brings quite significant importance. This BAG index. BAG index, it's kind of aggregated view of our member companies regarding the business climate, about the policies, employment, about investment climate, etc., etc. I think that bringing a couple of findings from this service, and we've been doing it since 2019. It's already how many years? Already 5 years we've been doing this survey, including the year when everything was okay, like 2019. Then it was COVID time, then recovery time, then war, and then what we were here now. I think that the ECA presented quite interesting figures, and these figures, robust macroeconomic figures, it's already reflecting the BAG, because business approach and their perception derived by their demand on their products and services. And if economy grows up, it means that their demand is high. Yeah, it's very simple, 2 + 2. And I think that when it comes to general approach, everyone understands that we need a kind of robust approach to fostering business-friendly environment. And it is what is reflected in figures, macro figures, and what the government is doing right now. However, there are a couple of obstacles that I have I wanted to explain now. The first of all is about regulatory framework. Of course, the policies carried out now in Georgia, they aim at kind of reducing bureaucracy. It's about opening and fostering transparency, but at the same time, we somehow linked with the transposition of new acquis to the Georgian reality. It's EU acquis and it's derived by our aspiration, European aspiration. In the short run, it creates kind of burden of cash flow of companies, but in long term, everyone understands that it is needed for the sustainable development of businesses, and that's why business kind of tolerant to these costs, because the long-term benefits that everyone, like we as a society, we as a country, can benefit from this path. But what is needed for investors, it is kind of predictability in these reforms, and here is the quite big room for the cooperation between associations, our association with the government, with policymakers, and this is what we're doing actually right now. The second, I would say, interesting finding for foreign investors is the behavior of local investors, because when we mention 1,500, about 95% of these companies are local companies. This is local investors, and their behavior, their investment activities, it's quite kind of indicator for international actors, you know. In the year 2023, we had record 70% of companies who answered that they increased their investment in Georgia. It's about new projects, it's about extension of existing projects, but still this is business activity, which is quite good indicator for international investors. Why? Because if locals are investing, if locals are ready to, if locals has this optimism in their investment, it means that it's worth to try what is Georgia about, and worth to go there and investigate the local landscape. But when investment goes up, it's create another pressure on different problem. We have quite interesting situation with unemployment, and this BAG index shows quite interesting results. On the one hand, we have record level of employment, demand on employment. We have a lot of vacancies, especially in new technologies. But at the same time, we have a quite significant figure, around 16–70% of unemployment in Georgia. And it is called structural unemployment. Yes, of course, there is a slightly problem with the alignment of educational output and market demand. But the good thing here is that companies itself, they're involved in an in-house different style of education, different form of education, the educational centers. It is about vocational education, short-term education, but if you take our figures from 2019, only 10% of our member companies replied that they had that time in-house educational centers. In 2023, it was around 45%. It means that the cooperation with policymakers, in cooperation with policymakers, companies invest in this field and creating quite fruitful soil for the further investors, because they are investing in human capital, and it doesn't mean that these people will exactly work in their companies. This is the human capital who will be accessible for all of the investors who decide to enter this market. And last but not least, it's about international activities. You know, what we detect during the studies is that year by year we increase the access of our products on different markets. I mean, free trade agreements. And now we already achieve around 2.5 billion customers at this point in time. But at the same time, you know, it creates a lot of optimism in business itself. But when we detect the highest level of optimism, it was in the February 2024. And you know why? Because this is the reflection of the decision in December. It's about EU candidacy, membership candidacy status, which get Georgia. And now the level of optimism in business, local business, is the highest, and it creates, you know, what is needed for the business. If there is optimism, it means that they are going to continue their investment. It was kind of short introduction of our BAG because it reflects the question you asked about the business climate. But on the other hand, you know, it is not only about kind of some historic data, etc. It is quite good guide for everyone, policymakers, investors. You can get these figures, these reports from our webpage, and I think it will be interesting for you to look through all these figures and all this data.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that, Eka, you are looking forward for this report. You are reading it because, Georgia has all this developmental potential. It has a resilient economy. It has sustained all these shocks. And talking about international shocks, and I would like to ask the question: what are the factors that have built this resilience in Georgia's economy, and how now, given what our private sector panelists said about the challenges that they're facing, how, from a government perspective, how are you going to help maintain resilience of an investment climate in Georgia?
Thank you, Alkis. And by the way, I did not even complain about the mic. I figured it was. As for resilience, I guess the resilience comes with the training. So we've been trained, I guess, with a lot of shocks historically because of our geopolitical context. So when you have to deal with something quite frequently, then you get used to be adjustable, adaptable, and reacting quickly. So maybe that's one of the positive side effects of constantly living in a world of challenges, so to say. But from a systematic point of view, I guess pretty much what I tried to cover during my presentation and the first question as well, what government can do is build the systems in place that can allow the private sector to work well. And not be expansionary when it does not have to be an expansionary, and at the same time be adaptive and adjusting and supportive when the support is needed based on the economic cycle. Some fundamentals from the perspective of the field that is under the governance of the Ministry of Finance that has been built already in place with the organic law and fiscal rules, that we do have the strictest fiscal rule in place. We cannot increase taxes without referendum, right? So it has some time tag on there, but that gives quite big credibility to business for quite a long period of time that taxes won't be something that will be increased. We have the fiscal rules on debt to GDP ratio. It should not be more than 60%, but according to our debt management strategy, we calculate safe debt level based on our economy together with the IMF, and we monitor that we are not around 60, but we are at this point around 40, because this is what is sustainable, that can absorb shocks that might come up, and they do come up, sometimes big, sometimes medium size. So to be ready for absorbing those shocks, this is why we keep our debt to GDP ratio at 40%. To GDP. Having the deficit below, not just around 3%, but below 2.5% to have some headroom there too. Running this fiscal policy from our perspective is something that supports the business and private sector, and at the same time allows us to respond when the response from the sovereign is needed. Then obviously capital market development, more sophisticated instruments to be in place, supporting through that is very important. Our relationships with the IFIs and the level of and the quality of discussion we are having with the IFIs on our pipelines, the content of the projects we will be investing, making sure that they are assessed and checked through a systematic approach, that they deliver high economic IRRs, and only then they get financed through external financing. Our willingness to increase co-financing from the government side together with the external financing, so that external expertise is maintained and the leadership is on the expertise in the sophisticated and complex projects, but at the same time it somehow compensates for the shocks that might be coming from indebtedness. This is what we try to avoid at the same time, right? So the system is there, it works. Unfortunately, the fiscal rule has to be tested within a couple of months after it was updated with the help of the IMF. Escape clauses were triggered and everything worked, so we now have a full cycle how fiscal rule had to deviate and then how it could be regained within the targets, and that has happened within the time frame that was allowed by the legislation. That worked one time. Hopefully we won't need to test it another time. But supporting the healthy system, I guess, is the only thing that can be done from our perspective.
Thank you. It looks as if economic resilience, in the case of Georgia, is a result of very good macro policies and creativity and commitment by the private sector to not lose out on the opportunities and what has been built, and of course on the role that international financial institutions can play in pushing for some reforms and, you know, in a cooperative way create this success story that we are enjoying so far. So, dear Archil, second round of questions. We are kind of limited for time, so try to be brief. We have 3 minutes for each question. So let's see. In which sectors, in your view, does Georgia have competitive advantage other than banking, I would say? I mean, banking is one, but other than banking, and that can leverage its future economic growth upon? And how well prepared are the Georgian banks to support these sectors? And what can institutions like EBRD do to support you?
I'll speed up my speaking.
Yeah.
So in terms of competitive advantage, yes, in terms of banking, we developed to a point where we can say that. But in terms of other sectors, rather than answering that question like that, where we have the competitive advantage, I would say where are the opportunities? Because when you look at the map, this middle corridor has increased in terms of significance. And I think there's a fantastic opportunity to develop the corridor. The corridor was always there. It's just the fact that for it to be efficient, you have to develop between countries tariff system and multimodal transportation system that is easy to track the freight and so forth. So it's easier said than done. So there's plenty of things to do. But given the fact that south of us there's a lot of trouble and north of us there's trouble, I think the middle corridor is an important corridor, and there's a real opportunity to develop it. And it's not just cargo, it's railway and roads, but it's not only that. There's telecoms as well, so fiber optic network that can go through the South Caucasus, and there's other types of logistical services that come with it. So there are opportunities regarding that. There's also energy that we are seeing. There's a big wave right now of wind and hydro development, some solar as well, and then that links to what can EBRD and other IFIs do to support such a development. So there's a significant network planning and operations that go with large development in energy. There's a chance that even if half of those energy projects develop, we'll have a significant oversupply in May and June to a point where the prices can drop to zero, and that kills any projects and so forth. So You need to increase the exports to different countries in the region, including Turkey, because there's a line there where we export extra energy. But there's also planning of the network, and it's not only Georgia that is facing that challenge. Worldwide, a lot of people are talking about increasing the capacity of the networks so that when the wind blows, it can be spread out, the energy in, let's say, in Europe, and when there's sun in Spain, you know, you can export that energy into north of Europe. Similarly, in Georgia, I think we need to have more interconnection and better ability to balance the peaks and droughts in energy. So that's where IFIs can have a bigger input in providing support to the operator and the Ministry of Energy or Ministry of Economy in this case to jumpstart that sector. So to develop that part a little bit more than is needed right now, so that all the projects can actually be accommodated.
Thank you very much for the answer. I agree with you. We have EBRD, you know, operates not only Caucasus. We have 38 countries of operation. Central Asia. I was based in Tashkent a few, months ago, and I've also heard the same vision of trying to connect, especially in the energy sector, trying to connect the potential of the various regions. So that was Central Asia, but here in Caucasus as well, and try for energy security. These are areas that are presenting themselves the opportunities for us to look at, and with strong banks, strong commercial banks, and the will of regulators, and with the role of IFIs, yes, I see potential. I see. Thank you very much for the response on this one. But in the middle corridor, in one of the challenges is to make it work. Is the technological advantage, digitalization of the middle corridor. I mean, and it's part of the low-hanging fruits in making the corridor work. So, in this context, Georgi, your second question, EBRD is trying to increase and foster digitalization in its 38 countries of operation, and we use. We can do this by using our financing tools and our policy dialogue, and I would like to know what is your assessment of Georgia's standing in digitalizing its economy, and how companies like yours can help achieve Georgia's potential and also the regional potential in this and make projects like a middle corridor work.
Sure. I mean, I'll try to in 3 minutes as well.
Yeah, 3 minutes is good.
Yeah. Hopefully enough. Very interesting question. I mean, this is the question that, in terms of digitalization, that minds that are much smarter and larger than mine have been discussing throughout the world, in trying to look at the effects that the digitalization overall has on economy and economic development. In parallel of that, when you look at this economies of the size of Georgia, with the population that Georgia has, the overall effect of the digitalization is probably even higher, and for the very specific reason. And that specific reason is that through digitalization, companies, individuals in the smaller markets have an ability to communicate and be the part of the larger whole, meaning that they can easily internationalize, they can supply, provide services, and be connected to the world markets. And for smaller markets, that's crucial. That's crucial, especially in a part of the world where, as all of respected panelists have mentioned, volatility is something that comes as a given, unfortunately. So the Georgian government, in my view, is similar to the Armenian government, will probably be emphasizing digital development and digitalization of the economies is one of the top priorities. What the companies such as ours can do, what we can do is we can add expertise to this process. We can not only add expertise, but we can add knowledge that we have and help the local companies in digitalizing their services and making sure that whatever best there is in terms of technology, in terms of the innovation, that could be applied locally, especially for the small and medium-sized companies that definitely have, as you well know through the work at the BRD, that have a very tough process in getting the access to finance, making sure that they have enough resources in order to cross the borders and be active across the region. And when you mentioned the middle corridor, of course, middle corridor is a business. Business has to grow, and hopefully Georgia not only will be the place through which that services are being offered, but the place where those services will be developed as well, and the high value chain services will be provided to a local and international market. And this is where technology companies come. This is where companies such as ours that are knowledgeable on the regional aspects, active in different parts across the region, in our case in Armenia and Georgia, can offer those services. And I think we look at it geographically as well. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit earlier today. Two large urban areas, Tbilisi and Yerevan. Geography between them, the distance between them is what? 200 miles, more or less, right? You look at the wider map, there is no other two cities of this size that are as close to each other than Tbilisi and Yerevan are. 2 million people population cities. That should be a catalyst for a lot of growth, a lot of economic activities. And this is where technology can help, because this is where the infrastructural development should come. This is where the connectivity should be the part of that. And this is why I think, due to the size of the investment that is required to bring those markets closer together, where the IFIs can play an outstanding, an outsized role as well. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Levan.
Very good point. I just want to add to this that as we were looking at investments in Yerevan, I had to travel back and forth over the last 12 months quite a bit. And I have to say, this road that goes up and down and it doesn't have any tunnels and it's not properly done, it's unfortunate that really, I mean, you look at the geography and there are two larger cities and don't have a proper road connection. It's just unbelievable, if you ask me. It's somehow like almost separately developed. And yes, people travel, but a lot of my friends have not been in Yerevan, and which I think is a pity. So there's plenty of opportunity to just do a simple thing, which is develop a proper highway connecting two large cities to each other, which is of this distance.
Yeah, it's a challenge for the budget, Eka, this one here, from the Georgian side. Levan, before going to Eka to conclude, I mean, if you can very briefly tell us on a few tips on investment climate. I mean, we heard now what about the resilience, and if you were asked to give some advice or some tips, what would be the key 1 or 2, 3 tips that you could ask the government to do, and for investors to hope that they will be implemented, so we can help with the banks and technology companies and ourselves to make this a reality.
Thank you. Quite interesting question. It's always difficult to choose 2 or 3 because there is a list of issues which is very important from the private point of view to be implemented and to be improved. But I'll give you kind of 2 or 3 main groups of issues that it's important to cooperate with the government, with policymakers. Of course, first one is about legal framework, what we're speaking about. And number 1 in a legal framework, from my point of view, it's PPP legislation. And this is what is needed to simplify it and what is needed to kind of adjust to the current reality. We're speaking about hundreds of megawatt of new investment, for example, in energy industry, but the legislation which is needed to go through during all this approval, it's quite complicated. And now this understanding, we already had the meeting with the Ministry of Economy. Personally, the Minister is quite open for the discussion, and we detect that there is a common understanding of these changes. This is number one problem for the huge project, which is which needs kind of private-public partnership. Another one, I would say, it's in general. We were speaking about digital transformation, but now we are on the verge of global transformation of economy, from current situation to the circular economy to green economy. And it's not only about construction of hydropower stations or wind and solar. It's about huge transformation demand side. And when we speaking about the European acquis transposition, etc., there is a huge burden for the changes, all these obsolete technologies. And when we're speaking changes of technology, it's quite easy to speak it, but it's doing it is quite capital intensive, of course. And here we need cooperation, government, private sector, IFIs, international organization, to find proper sources for the financing all these changes. Because if you look at just one acquis requires in a 10-year changes all forms of the technology in heavy industry. And, there is a acquis and there is a special document which derives from acquis. It's 100 pages of description, just technology. You need days and months just to read all this technology to understand what is needed for you for the changes. And then you have to find the proper investment sources and financing sources and then change all this stuff. Here I think there is a room of cooperation with EBRD as well, because what companies is needed is capacity building and supporting companies in capacity building, how to guide them, what to do. It's general, of course, it derives from the general approach, general path to circular economy, to green economy, but at the same time, it is very country-specific, sector-specific, and it needs support from outside, from IFIs and international organization. This is very brief, I would say.
Thank you.
My view about the changes, priorities which is needed for the changes.
Thank you very much. We are exactly completing the time that was allocated for our session, but I would like to have one last question, but please let it be a 1 minute response. A lot of what is needed needs budget support, and from in front of the Minister of Finance, maybe I'm asking the question. What is, I mean, we discussed middle corridor, big investments, right? We heard messages from the private sector on digitalization, on making the regulatory changes. This would need state support. So what are the priorities and what is the room for the budget that you're handling, to support these priorities and put Georgia on the global stage, unlocking investment opportunities?
Thank you, Akis, but this is very tough. This is something that can talk the whole day, I guess, not just 1 minute. But I'll try. We do position ourselves as the bridge between Europe and Asia. We've just achieved the greatest milestone of getting the EU candidacy status. It was mentioned how acquis and directives that need to come up with the legislation updates are also costly in some ways in the immediate future, but obviously the benefits in the long run are so important. We've shown the figures that look nice for the proving resilience, but it does not mean that we are perfect. Most importantly, it means that there is so much catching up to do, because the sophistication of the level of engagement that is required from the sovereign as well as private sector is becoming even more complex, even more multidimensional, and being the middle corridor player, being in this crossroads or junctions or whatever this means that we need to be even more adaptive, more adjustable, and more efficient in prioritizing what we invest for and what we support through budget. I mentioned that irrespective of all the fiscal constraints, we always kept our capex at 7-8%. Not many countries do that when they have the need of declining on their deficit or debt to GDP ratio. But Roads were bulk of our capex for more than a decade, right? So East-West Highway, which was a very important one, almost finalized. We've been there on the opening of the different segments. A lot of tunnels, a lot of bridges, but obviously there is a demand that it needs to continue to the southern part. Northern part will be also quite soon finalized. But this is still something that needs to stay in our pipeline, but at the same time, what we are discussing with you, with every IFI, is the energy security and energy independence is something that has come up as a one priority for our pipeline, which will be also sovereign supported. It cannot be completely private-led, but it very well brings to what Levon just mentioned, that we really trust that projects we're talking now as a EU flagship project, for example, the submarine Black Sea cable, both energy and digital, they will be private sector-led with sovereign engagement as needed from the countries who participate in the memorandum or whatever the arrangement will be there. But yeah, that is also something where the private sector and public sector or sovereign sector needs to work in synergy to achieve those projects. The fact that Middle Corridor has become very popular now is something that we've been insisting on much earlier. The submarine cable was the flagship project under the EU investment plan before the war, and we've been investing in the East-West Highway before the war, much earlier than the war. So this is something that the countries of this region have been insisting that this corridor, yes, exists, is there, but needs to be efficient, and the investments are needed there. But then you mentioned digital. Then this brings us to human capital. It cannot be only all the hard infrastructure. They need to also have some space accommodated for soft components of the reforms like education, healthcare, social. These are services that needs to be provided by the government and needs to be supported. Because, as we very often say, education is the only long-term reform we are having in our pipeline. So, I mean, I guess I'm over the 1 minute, and I could continue to talk about this for much longer than 1 minute. But that is well heard. That is something that is depicted in our pipelines, and that is something that is very thoroughly thought through when prioritizing for our medium-term public investment plans or medium-term budget frameworks as such. We've submitted our first economic reform plan to EU this year as part of the EU candidacy. This also became an exercise that is not domestic MTBF only, but it also discussed now, we just came from Brussels this morning, that has become the part of the European discussion as well. And having this platform or discussing on these investment pipelines and priorities gives more level of sophistication to that, and hopefully it gives more trust to the future of this segment. Thank you.
I would like to thank all our panelists for their comprehensive responses and for almost keeping the time. If I would like to summarize, it's like I'm convinced, and I live in Tbilisi now for a few months. I'm convinced that it's a collective effort. I mean, authorities, private sector, IFIs have a complex, challenging environment to comprehend and jointly assist one another to achieve the ambitious targets we have in putting Georgia, but not only Georgia, actually in raising and disclosing the capacity, the capabilities of the whole South Caucasus region. We were discussing of bringing Armenia closer to be an active participant in the Middle Corridor discussions, in infrastructure, and many things, and that where energy security is a big topic. So, in summary, we have lots of work to do, and with competent partners and strong participants from the private sector, goodwill from the government and the IFIs, I think we have a good work environment and a good outlook and good hope for the future. So, in summary, thank you very much, and a big round of applause for the panelists and their comprehensive answers. I would like also to say that in 40 minutes from now, we will be having in this hall the signing of Tbilisi landfill gas project. Is a very important project for the EBRD. I'm looking at my colleagues that have worked a number of months on this. It's a project that will improve lives of Tbilisi citizens, and it's a public sector project that we are very proud to be financing in a few minutes. So those ones who have a few more minutes to spend with us, please enjoy coffee and then come back in 40 minutes. Thank you so much.